and they're basically measuring my love for my own father based off of what I post.
Paris Jackson uttered the words that altered the course of history. She told the world in 2017 that her father's death was staged. Despite being barely 18, she spoke with startling assurance. And they're essentially using what I post to gauge how Muaher people wanted him dead. Michael had warned. One day, he claimed they will murder him. He even expressed his concern for his life in letters. However, Paris exposed something more sinister. According to her, obtaining justice is similar to playing chess. She needed to exercise caution. What is it that she actually knows? What is the reason behind the Jackson family's intense efforts to conceal some secrets? The history of Paris Jackson's name is unique. It all started when Michael Jackson, who was still only a teenager at the time, made a playful pledge with his sister LaToya and their close friend Kathy Hilton in the late 1970s. They decided to name their daughter Paris, if any of them ever had one. It was a straightforward agreement formed out of youth and camaraderie. That promise materialized years later. Michael followed through on his promise to name his daughter Paris, Michael Catherine Jackson, on April 3, 1998. The fact that she was supposedly born in Paris while Michael and Debbie Rowe were there made the name even more significant. Kathy Hilton, who in 1981 gave birth to her own daughter Paris, likewise carried on that ancient vow. Paris Jackson had a distinct identity from birth because of the connection between these families and the significance of her name. However, her birth tale involved more than just names and promises. It was entangled in controversy from the beginning. Many people thought Michael's 1996 marriage to Debbie Rowe was odd. There were rumors that the partnership was more of an arrangement than a romantic one. According to reports, Rowe consented to give Michael the children he desired in exchange for removing himself from their lives. Rowe reportedly received a settlement of about $8.5 million following their 1999 divorce. The Jackson family allegedly gave her an additional $4 million when Michael passed away in 2009, in order for her to relinquish whatever parental rights she might have. Although attorneys denied that money was exchanged for custody, the public continued to believe that Rowe's position was more of a business arrangement than a marriage. This stood in stark contrast to the charming tale of Paris's name. At Neverland Ranch, Paris's formative years were anything but typical. Paris, Prince, and Blanket were rarely spotted without masks over their faces because Michael was so concerned about his kids' safety. One of the most talked about and perplexing aspects of their lives became these masks, wished to shield them from the bright glare he had experienced as a child, from paparazzi, and from kidnappers. Paris didn't grasp it as a kid. However, as she grew older, she came to understand that her father was attempting to provide them with a regular life, at least in public. Their grandma, Catherine, promptly discontinued the mask custom after Michael passed away. However, the public's perception of those veiled kids persisted, an odd reminder of Michael's efforts to protect them. Her godparents were everything but typical. Michael picked Macaulay Culkin and Elizabeth Taylor because they both understood what it was like to grow up in the spotlight. In the spotlight, Elizabeth took on the role of a grandmother figure, sharing insights from her own life. Having once been a kid celebrity himself, Macaulay became a trustworthy friend to Paris. These ties weren't merely symbolic. They served as Paris's lifelines, assisting her in coping with the demands of being Michael Jackson's daughter. Paris's early years were characterized by loneliness. She was homeschooled at Neverland Ranch until the 6th grade. Almost none of her buddies were her own age. She spent most of her time with her family and employees. After Michael's passing, she was overwhelmed when she eventually started attending a regular school. All of a sudden, she needed to adapt, how to interact with other children, and how to handle life in general. She stated it was difficult to catch up and that it was frightening. The years of seclusion had a profound impact. Paris also battled anxiety and sadness as she grew older, searching for her place in the world. At the age of 11, Paris had one of the most memorable events of her life. She took the microphone at Michael's memorial service in Los Angeles on July 7, 2009. Nobody anticipated her speaking. With her family at her side, she sobbed as she informed the world, "Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine since I was born. And I simply want to express how much I adore him." Millions of people were impacted by that unvarnished emotional moment. There was no plan. It was just the heartfelt words of a bereaved daughter. Her voice was also heard for the first time by the majority of the world. Her sobbing in her Aunt Janet's arms came to represent both the public sorrow and Paris's abrupt and agonizing rise to fame. Following Michael's passing, a flurry of custody disputes arose. The argument was acrimonious, but interim custody was granted to his mother, Catherine. The conflict involved Debbie Rowe and other family members, including T.J. Jackson, Michael's nephew. Despite having over $400 million in debt, Michael's estate was supposed to continue making millions of dollars annually. Things got much more difficult in 2012. TJ was appointed temporary guardian while Catherine was absent for a few days. A judge determined that they would share guardianship after she returned. The children's lives remained precarious and in the spotlight due to the fluctuating arrangements. Paris took a significant global step in 2010. She began her education at the elite Buckley School in Los Angeles, which cost over $30 annually. After a lifetime of homeschooling, it was unexpected. She had students her own age, rules to follow, and a daily schedule that wasn't centered around Neverland for the first time. As Michael Jackson's daughter, she had to quickly learn how to fit in, cope with other children, and face bullying. She demonstrated strength and did her best to adapt, even though it wasn't easy. Paris Jackson suffered a horrific tragedy when she was just 14 years old. She was sexually attacked by a much older stranger, but she kept it a secret from her friends and family. Feeling broken and alone, she kept it trapped inside. She endured years of the agony, which left her feeling depressed and unworthy. It was even more difficult to keep such a secret when you were growing up as Michael Jackson's kid and everyone was watching. She didn't have the confidence to discuss it until she was older, and she used her experience to demonstrate that no one, regardless of identity, is protected from such a terrible act. Life felt too much to handle by the time Paris was 15. She resorted to heroin and alcohol as a way to cope with the grief and agony following the death of her father in 2009. Unlike some kids, she wasn't just trying drugs or drinking alcohol. She was deep in addiction, using needles. She used it as a means of evading the pain of her father's passing, the attack, and the ongoing demands of fame. She later identified as a heroin addict and alcoholic. But by January 2025, she had celebrated 5 years clean. It wasn't simple for her to get there. She was fighting a wicked force that had seized control of her childhood. Paris's suffering was made public in June 2013, when she was just 15 years old. She attempted suicide by ingesting 20 ibuprofen pills, and severing her wrist with a kitchen knife. Perhaps saving her life, she called a helpline and left a note. She was taken by ambulance to the hospital, where she was monitored by doctors for 3 days. People were astonished and alarmed as the news traveled around the world. Paris believed she didn't deserve to be here and that she couldn't do anything correctly. To aid with her recovery, her family enrolled her in a special education program in Utah. However, she wasn't sure if it helped, and it was a difficult journey. Most individuals were unaware that Paris attempted self-harm in other years besides 2013. She then revealed that no one, not even her family, was aware of earlier instances in which she attempted suicide or slashed herself. She battled despair, bullying, and the trauma she couldn't get over while hiding her wounds and suffering. Years later, she spoke about it to illustrate how difficult it is to face these challenges alone, particularly when everyone believes you have a flawless life. The connection between Paris's experience and her father is among its most heartbreaking elements. The same depression medications that Michael Jackson had used were prescribed to her by doctors. She was afraid since she was taking the same medication as her father, who passed away from drug use. She seemed to be following the same perilous route. Her family had a history of depression, and she felt caught in that loop because of the medicines. She eventually made the decision to quit taking them in an effort to find alternative methods of feeling better. When Paris Hilton's documentary, This Is Paris, was released in 2020, it stunned the entire globe. She disclosed the horrendous mistreatment she had experienced at Utah's Provo Canyon School. Others were able to speak up because of her tale. Paris Jackson was one of those. At last, she spoke up. She revealed that, as a teenager, she had previously been taken to a boarding school for behavior management. She spent nearly 2 years there. She was severely damaged by what was meant to assist her. As a result of the experience, she was eventually diagnosed with PTSD. According to Paris Jackson, the school's employees deceived parents. The staff assured parents that the youngsters' cries for assistance were simply the manipulation of troubled teenagers. The reality was much more sinister. Paris clarified how these institutions may close and relaunch under a different name in order to stay out of legal trouble. They were able to keep hurting youngsters because, to this nasty trick, Paris called for the permanent closure of these schools and joined the Breaking Code Silence movement. The nation was incensed by her and Paris Hilton's remarks. People began urging the authorities to intervene and put an end to the mistreatment occurring in these purportedly therapeutic facilities. Harris's time at the school caused her to experience chronic pain rather than recovery. She has spoken her PTSD candidly. She still has nightmares and finds it difficult to put her trust in others. The methods used by the school were harsh. They abused people emotionally and isolated them. They perverted things such that it was risky to even attempt to get in touch with her relatives. Calls would be blocked, and staff would inform parents that their youngster was simply misbehaving. Students were almost impossible to believe as a result. Speaking up frequently resulted in a lengthier stay or harsher punishment. The emergence of Paris Jackson in acting and fashion was everything but typical. She signed a huge contract with Calvin Klein in 2017 at the age of 19. She gained notoriety in the fashion industry thanks to the $1 million transaction. Calvin Klein wanted her to be the brand's spokesperson, not merely a model. Her gloomy, melancholy appearance went well with their audacious, defiant persona. According to insiders, the contract was enormous, 7 figures, millions of dollars. Paris was supposed to dominate advertising campaigns and walk the red carpet in Calvin Klein. She was viewed as the future by the brand's creative officer, Raf Simons. It wasn't all sunshine and rose for Paris, Michael Jackson's daughter, who was now a member of the next generation of icons. Debates concerning honesty and fashion were sparked by some fans' criticism of Calvin Klein for photoshopping her tattoos. When she signed with IMG Models, her journey took yet another significant turn. She signed on with the same agency as Hailey Baldwin, Bella and Gigi Hadid, and Gisele Bündchen. At the time, Paris was only 18. The president of the agency referred to her as a unique sensation. This meant that Paris was no longer solely Michael Jackson's daughter. In the world of modeling, she was on her own. Expressed her gratitude to IMG in public, stating that she felt fortunate. The agency had a reputation for making models into celebrities. Paris was prepared to demonstrate that she was one of the greatest. Paris became well known in high fashion after landing a Chanel campaign shortly after. The location for the shot was close to the Eiffel Tower in Paris. The theme of World War II was bold. Paris sat on a jeep wearing a white skirt, large glittery earrings, and a sheer shirt that exposed her nipple piercings. The pictures created a commotion. She was likened to Madonna. Paris, now 18, was working with high-end designers and attracting attention everywhere she went. Her unique style consisted of red lipstick, black eyebrows, and platinum hair. When agencies saw the ad, they wanted to collaborate with her. Beyond fashion, she became well known. She proved to the world that she was more than simply a well-known daughter when she made an appearance on the cover of Rolling Stone. The CR fashion book cover followed. Paris, who was styled by Corrine Reutfeld, talked about her father's influence while sporting Gucci. "He is the source of 99% of my inspiration," she remarked. Halima Adan, who had a fresh take on fashion, was also featured in the magazine. Paris had her own voice and style, as the cover demonstrated. As Paris's career progressed, her sense of style evolved. She adored black hair, torn band t-shirts, boots, piercings, and punk and grunge as a teenager. More rock and roll than goth, she claimed. She softened her style by 2017. She started donning earthy hues, flowy gowns, and jewelry. Her bright makeup and tattoos helped her maintain some of her edge. Paris was able to effortlessly go from bohemian to high fashion by her mid-20s. At Paris Fashion Week, she dazzled audiences with her bold styles and sheer gowns. Paris's plan was always to act. She starred in Bridge and The Three Keys in London when she was 13. A girl who was brainwashed by a jellyfish queen was the subject of an odd tale. The film's goal was to use its earnings to support schools, but it was never created due to delays and personal issues, such as Paris's 2013 suicide attempt. Nevertheless, it demonstrated her will to forge her own route. In 2017, she made her acting debut on Fox's Star. Paris portrayed the fierce and fashionable social media specialist Rachel Wallace. Her own self was completely different from the character. It encouraged her to demonstrate her abilities. She did well in a screen test, and Lee Daniels offered her the role. The March 2017 episode demonstrated Paris's ability to perform with celebrities like Queen Latifah. She didn't hesitate to take chances. She co-starred with Charlize Theron in a tiny role in Gringo in 2018. However, the independent film Habit was the biggest shock to her. Paris, who wore a nose ring while playing Jesus in the movie, caused a great deal of criticism. More than 266,000 individuals have signed a petition to outlaw the movie by the middle of 2020. Although it was never verified, there were rumors that her Jesus persona was a lesbian. Refused to give up. She demonstrated that, despite the criticism, she was prepared to take risks. She joined American Horror Stories in 2021. She portrayed Maya, a harsh and vicious teenager who betrays a friend and suffers a terrible fate. Filming emotional passages was difficult, and the part was challenging. Paris, however, accepted the role of a ghost trapped in Murder House and relished the challenge. She was able to win over genre fans and demonstrate her ability to handle challenging roles on the show. She picked her projects wisely. She sought to collaborate with renowned filmmakers such as Lee Daniels, who mentored her in Star. For years, she had been preparing for the ideal opportunity. Her decisions demonstrated that she desired recognition as an artist in addition to celebrity. There was more than simply love at first sight when Paris Jackson and Gabriel Glenn first met in 2018. Something that would alter her life was only getting started. The Rainbow Bar and Grill on Sunset Strip is where they first met. There was a lot of rock history there, and that evening, they clicked. Before long, they were collaborating on songs. The Soundflowers was their name. The name reflected their appreciation of nature and their ability to find beauty and progress even in the face of adversity. Together, they shared their adventure with the world on the unfiltered Facebook Watch show. Gabriel Glenn and Paris Jackson. This was a daring step for Paris, who had been raised in secret as Michael Jackson's daughter. The show showed their hardships as a couple under the scrutiny of the public. In addition to how they made music, Paris took a significant first step toward establishing her own musical career. With this, Paris encountered one of the most difficult situations of her life on June 23, 2018. Her first actual performance took place at Canyon Sessions in Los Angeles. It was a cancer research charity event. It wasn't only supporters in the audience. People who were familiar with and adored her father's music filled the place. In an attempt to conceal her trepidation, she performed barefoot. However, the audience witnessed her unadulterated emotion when she sang Daisy and In the Blue. The song expressed both pain and hope. She was likened to Joni Mitchell. Her performance videos became viral. All of a sudden, Paris was viewed by the world as a genuine artist with her own voice rather than Michael's daughter. Fans got a closer glimpse at Paris Jackson and Gabriel Glenn's lives in June 2020 when the show exposed their lives. There were ups and downs throughout the 6 episodes. Paris talked candidly about her sexual orientation and the difficulties she encountered after coming out. She described the agony of attempting suicide when she was 15. She also discussed the challenges of living under her father's shadow. There was one particularly memorable occasion. "I feel like I'll never be enough," she remarked. The show received plaudits for its honesty and realism. People witnessed the stress she was under and the healing power of music. Paris and Gabriel parted ways in August of 2020. Let Down, her debut solo track, was born out of the hurt of the split. She used her guitar to write it by herself at night. October 30, 2020, was the release date of the song. It was a scary video. Wearing a Victorian bride's garb and sporting blood on her lips, she displayed the unrelenting misery. In a few days, the video received over 1 million views. The song's depth and honesty won praise from critics. Let Down demonstrated Paris's independence as an artist. She was able to recover and regain her strength by writing it. Then, on November 13, 2020. Her album, Wilted, was made available. She collaborated with Manchester Orchestra's Andy Hall. The album featured a blend of alternative, indie rock, and folk music. In a single day, it soared to the top of the iTunes Alternative Albums chart. In the first week, more than 20,000 copies were sold. All 11 songs were written by Paris or co-written. Heartbreak, loss, and beginning afresh were all discussed in the album. Her lyrics were acclaimed by certain critics. Some people thought the CD was excessively depressing. Wilted proved Paris was more than simply Michael Jackson's kid, though, and that was undeniable. She was an artist figuring things out on her own.